Can you imagine it? On a scorching summer afternoon beside a glittering lake, a poor nanny throws herself into the icy water, pulling a 6-year-old girl who is slowly sinking away from death. Just seconds later, the powerful father comes running, sees the soaked, gaunt girl clutching his daughter tightly. And right in that moment, in his eyes filled with terror and gratitude, a feeling suddenly erupts, intense, insane, completely uncontrollable. "She will never be allowed to leave here again," he whispers, his voice trembling with emotion. Or with an obsession that has just been born. From a starving, barely surviving nanny living day to day, she suddenly becomes the only woman who can make a mafia boss willing to trade everything, even his own life. But will that lightning strike love be strong enough to protect her from the gun barrels now aimed straight at their new family? Or will it drag all three of them into the abyss? Stay with me, because this story will make it impossible for you to look away. Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions, or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. All right, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. My name is Emily Harper, and by the summer of 2025, I had learned to measure life in small, desperate victories. A 28-year-old woman from North Las Vegas, Nevada, I had spent the last few years scraping by on whatever nanny jobs I could find in the outer suburbs. The pay was never enough, around $20 an hour on good days, less when families cut corners. After sending money to help my mother with her medical bills and keeping my younger brother in community college, there was barely anything left for rent on the tiny studio apartment I shared with 2 roommates. Some nights, the pantry held only a half-empty box of generic macaroni and a jar of peanut butter thinned with water to make it stretch. I was thin myself, ribs showing under faded thrift store tees, my skin pale from too many sleepless shifts and not enough fresh air. Scorching Las Vegas summers had baked through my threadbare clothes all day, and the dry desert winds had bitten sharply on cooler nights, leaving me shivering in a coat that had seen better decades. I had always loved children, their honesty, their uncomplicated joy, so nannying felt like the one thing I was good at. When an agency called about a live-in position for a wealthy family in the exclusive Lake Las Vegas community in Henderson, I almost hung up. Those jobs usually went to women with fancy certifications or years of experience in high-end resorts. But they said the father, Michael Russo, needed someone immediately for his 6-year-old daughter, Sophia. The background check was thorough, questions about family, finances, even old parking tickets. But the salary they quoted made my hands tremble, enough to clear my debts and finally breathe. The morning I arrived at the mansion overlooking the shimmering man-made lake, the August heat shimmered off the water like a mirage, but the desert breeze carried a dry bite. The estate was everything I had imagined wealth to be, a sprawling Mediterranean-style fortress with guarded gates, palm-lined driveways, and manicured gardens bursting with desert blooms and imported roses. Security cameras watched from every angle, and suited men nodded silently as the rideshare dropped me at the entrance. My suitcase was old, patched with duct tape, holding everything I owned: a few worn sundresses, 1 good pair of sandals, and a photo of my mother smiling before the illness took its toll. Mrs. Ellis, the stern head of household staff, met me at the grand double doors. She eyed my appearance without comment, leading me through terrazzo floors that echoed under my cheap shoes. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Fresh orchids in vases that probably cost more than my monthly rent perfumed the air. Everything gleamed: polished stone walls, plush Persian rugs, artwork on the walls that looked like it belonged in a gallery. I felt small, out of place, like a smudge on perfect marble. Michael Russo was waiting in his study, a vast room lined with leather-bound books and a massive walnut desk. He was tall, broad-shouldered, fair-skinned with dark hair just beginning to gray at the temples. His suit looked custom-tailored, his watch a subtle flash of platinum. But his eyes, deep brown, shadowed, held something raw, like a man carrying invisible weights. He had lost his wife 2 years earlier in a tragic accident, the agency whispered, and since then he had thrown himself into work, leaving little time for Sophia. He studied me quietly as I stood there, clutching my suitcase handle. "Miss Harper," he said, voice low and controlled. "Sophia needs stability, someone patient, kind. The agency says you have experience with children who've been through difficult times." I nodded, throat tight. "Yes, sir. I've worked with families facing challenges. I love kids. They deserve to feel safe." He nodded once, something flickering in his expression. Approval, perhaps, or recognition of shared pain. Inside, guilt gnawed at him. He knew he had been distant from Sophia, burying grief in endless meetings and the demands of his business empire. Remorse twisted like a knife. He had promised his late wife he would always put family first, yet here he was, relying on a stranger. Sophia was a quiet little girl with dark curls and solemn eyes, hiding behind Mrs. Ellis's skirt when introduced. My heart ached for her. She reminded me of myself at that age, after Dad left and money grew tight. I knelt, smiling softly. "Hi, Sophia. I'm Emily. Want to show me your room?" She peeked out, curious despite her shyness. That first day, I unpacked in the staff quarters, a small but clean room with a real bed and private bath, luxuries I hadn't known in years. Dinner was served in the staff kitchen, grilled salmon, fresh salads, things I usually couldn't afford. I ate slowly, savoring, tears pricking my eyes at the simple abundance. But poverty's shadows lingered. That night, alone in my room, dizziness washed over me, hunger pangs from lean months, exhaustion from sleepless worry. I sat on the edge of the bed, head spinning, wondering if this was real or another cruel dream that would vanish. Fear gripped me. What if I messed up? What if they saw how broken I was? Yet curiosity stirred too. This world of wealth, so close yet impossibly far from my own. Michael watched from his office monitors, guilt deepening. He had built an empire, high-end resorts on the surface, shadowed dealings beneath, that demanded constant vigilance. Rival groups from out of state probed his territory, tense street confrontations flaring without warning. Just last week, his men had stared down intruders near a warehouse on the outskirts, words sharp, threats veiled but clear. He carried the weight of protection, remorse for the risks his life brought to Sophia. Seeing Emily with his daughter, gentle, patient, stirred something buried. A surge of protectiveness, fierce and unexpected. She was destitute, fragile, yet strong in ways his money couldn't buy. His heart conflicted violently. Remorse for his hardened life, guilt for dragging innocence close, and a growing, overwhelming pull toward this woman who had entered his home like quiet light. Little did I know, in those first quiet days, how everything would shatter and rebuild in ways that would tear at my soul. Confusion, terror, and a love so intense it would drown out the poverty that had defined me. 3 weeks into the job, the August heat in Henderson had turned merciless. The sun blazed down on Lake Las Vegas like a furnace, turning the water into a sheet of hammered silver. I had been folding tiny sundresses in Sophia's bedroom on the second floor when I glanced out the wide window toward the private dock. The house was quiet. Mrs. Ellis downstairs preparing lunch, the security men somewhere out of sight, Michael gone since dawn on one of his long, unexplained absences. Sophia had been playing in her room earlier, but now the doorway stood empty. A small flutter of worry brushed my chest. She was supposed to stay inside during the hottest hours, Michael's strict rule, repeated by Mrs. Ellis with the gravity of law. I set the laundry aside and stepped to the window. There she was, a tiny figure in a pale blue swimsuit and an oversized Chicago Cubs t-shirt, walking alone along the long wooden dock that stretched into the lake. Her dark curls bounced as she skipped, clutching a plastic bag of breadcrumbs she must have taken from the kitchen. She was feeding the ducks that gathered near the pylons, laughing softly to herself, the sound carrying faintly on the still air. My heart tightened. The dock had no railing on the far end, and the water dropped off sharply into the deep, cold reservoir. Mrs. Ellis had warned me the first day. Sophia was not allowed near the water without supervision. She couldn't swim well yet, too frightened after her mother's death. Something about the accident had left the little girl terrified of deep water. I watched, breath held, telling myself she would be fine. She was only tossing crumbs from the edge. But then she stepped farther out, balancing on the narrow planks, arms outstretched like a tightrope walker. The plastic bag slipped from her fingers. She bent to grab it. Her foot caught on a raised board. Everything slowed. Her small body pitched forward. Arms windmilled, once, twice. A silent cry opened her mouth. Then she was gone, over the edge, disappearing with a splash that sounded both too loud and too small against the vast lake. For one stunned heartbeat, I stood frozen, dizziness crashing over me like a wave. Hunger from skipped meals, exhaustion from nights spent worrying about Mom's hospital bills, the sudden terror, all of it collided inside my chest. My knees buckled, but I caught the windowsill. No time. I ran. Bare feet slapped against cool marble as I flew down the hallway. The grand staircase blurred beneath me. I took the steps 2, 3 at a time, nearly falling. My lungs burned. The back door was locked. Fingers fumbled with the deadbolt until it gave. Heat slammed into me as I burst outside, the desert sun blinding after the air-conditioned house. The dock was 50 yards away across perfect grass. My legs pumped, thin and weak from too little food, but adrenaline carried me. I could see the ripples spreading from where Sophia had vanished. No sign of her dark curls at the surface. I did not slow, did not pause to kick off my shoes or strip away the simple cotton dress I wore. I hit the dock running, boards thudding beneath me, and dove. The water shocked me, cold, deep, impossibly clear. Chlorine-free reservoir water stung my eyes as I forced them open. Down, down, Sophia was sinking fast, her little limbs flailing weakly, eyes wide with panic. Her Cubs shirt billowed around her like a parachute, dragging her deeper. Bubbles streamed from her mouth. Muscle memory from long ago summer swim lessons in public pools surged back. I kicked hard, arms pulling in strong strokes. My dress clung heavy, restricting movement, but I reached her, wrapped one arm around her chest, and kicked upward with everything I had. My lungs screamed. The weight of wet fabric and a terrified child pulled at me. For one horrifying second, I thought we would both sink. Darkness pressed at the edges of my vision. Then my head broke the surface. Air rushed in, harsh and sweet. Sophia coughed, water spilling from her lips. I swam sideways toward the shallower area near the dock ladder, keeping her head above water. My arms shook violently, legs felt like lead, but I did not stop until my feet touched the sandy bottom. I carried her up the ladder and onto the hot wooden planks, laying her gently down. She coughed again, harder, expelling lake water. Her face was ghostly pale, lips tinged blue, but her chest rose and fell. She was breathing. I knelt beside her, hands trembling on her small shoulders. "You're okay, sweetheart," I whispered, voice cracking. "Just breathe, slow breaths. I've got you." Her wide eyes found mine, terrified, confused, but trusting. Tears mixed with lake water on her cheeks. She tried to speak, but only a whimper came. Then the world exploded with sound. Heavy footsteps pounded across the lawn. I looked up to see Michael Russo sprinting toward us, suit jacket gone, white shirt sleeves rolled high, tie askew. His face was stripped of its usual control, raw fear I never imagined possible in a man who commanded rooms without raising his voice. He dropped to his knees beside Sophia, hands hovering as though afraid to touch her. "Sophia, baby, can you hear me?" His voice was rough, breaking. She nodded weakly, still coughing. Michael pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. His broad shoulders shook. For a moment I thought he was sobbing, but when he turned his head, his eyes were dry, only trembling with leftover terror. He had been in a tense meeting downtown when the security alert reached his phone. Motion sensors triggered at the dock. He had left mid-negotiation, tires screeching through Las Vegas streets, heart hammering with images of losing the last piece of his wife. Now, holding his daughter, remorse flooded him in a violent wave. Guilt for his absences, for the dangerous life that kept him away, for failing to protect the two women who had meant everything to him. The inner tearing was unbearable. He had almost lost Sophia today because he had not been here. Only then did his gaze shift to me. I was still on my knees, soaked through, cotton dress plastered to my thin frame, hair dripping into my eyes. Lake water pooled beneath me on the dock. My body shook uncontrollably. Cold, shock, adrenaline. I could barely feel my fingers. Michael's eyes met mine fully for the first time since I had arrived. Not a glance, not dismissal, but a deep, searching stare that seemed to strip away every layer of defense I had built against the world. Something shifted in his expression. Fear drained away, replaced by disbelief, then fierce, overwhelming gratitude. And beneath it, something hotter, deeper, almost violent in its sudden intensity. He shifted Sophia gently to one arm and reached down with the other, grasping my wrist and pulling me to my feet. His grip was strong, almost bruising, but warm against my icy skin. He did not let go. "You pulled her out," he said, voice low, rough with emotion, not a question. I managed a nod, throat too tight for words. "You dove in, clothes and all." His eyes swept over me, taking in the clinging dress, the shivering, the exhaustion written in every line of my body. There wasn't time," I whispered, soft and timid, the way poverty had taught me to speak to anyone with power. His jaw clenched. Something fierce flashed across his face. Protectiveness, possession, a love so sudden and consuming it frightened even him. Inside, his heart tore in opposite directions, gratitude that threatened to break him, guilt that he had needed a stranger to save his child, and a burning, irrational need to keep this fragile woman close forever. He cupped the side of my face with his free hand, palm warm against my cold cheek, thumb brushing gently beneath my eye. The touch was reverent, shaking. "You saved my daughter's life," he said, voice dropping to something raw and dangerous. "Do you understand what that means?" I could only stare, dizzy again, the world tilting. His touch, his words, the intensity in his dark eyes, it was too much. Poverty had taught me to expect nothing. Now, this powerful man looked at me as though I were everything. Sophia stirred in his arms, small voice hoarse. "Daddy, the nice lady saved me." Michael's gaze never left mine. The gratitude, the remorse, the sudden possessive love, it all crashed together inside him until he could barely breathe. He pulled me closer until I was pressed against them both, father and daughter, warm and solid and alive. His voice, when it came, was quiet but absolute, vibrating with emotion I could feel in my bones. "You're never leaving." The words hung between us, heavy with promise and threat and something deeper, something that terrified me as much as it called to every desperate, lonely part of my soul. In that moment, on the sun-scorched dock with lake water dripping from us both, everything changed. The poverty that had defined me, the fear that had governed me, they cracked open under the weight of his gaze. And though confusion and terror flooded me in equal measure, a tiny, impossible seed of hope took root. I did not yet understand that the man holding me had just fallen, suddenly, violently, irrevocably, in love. The world narrowed to the sound of Sophia's ragged breathing and the heat of Michael Russo's hand still gripping my arm. Water dripped from my hair, from the hem of my soaked dress, forming dark pools on the sun-bleached dock. My body shook so violently I feared my legs would give out, but his hold kept me upright. I could feel the strength in his fingers, the barely contained tremor running through him. Everything felt unreal, distant, as though I were watching someone else's life through fogged glass. Sophia clung to her father's neck, small face buried against his shoulder, her coughing finally easing into exhausted whimpers. Michael's white dress shirt was soaked where she pressed against him, but he did not seem to notice. His eyes, those deep, shadowed brown eyes, never left my face. I tried to speak, to say something polite and small, the way poverty had trained me, but my voice came out a cracked whisper. She's okay, sir. She's breathing." The word "sir" felt wrong the moment it left my lips. Too servile, too frightened, yet I could not stop it. Years of speaking softly to landlords, to bill collectors, to anyone who held power over my survival, had carved that timidity into me. Michael's jaw tightened. Something fierce and pained flashed across his expression. He shifted Sophia higher in his arms and reached out again, this time cupping the side of my chilled face with a gentleness that made my chest ache. His palm was warm, calloused in places I did not expect from a man who wore platinum watches. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, wiping away a mixture of lake water and tears I had not realized were falling. "You saved her," he said again, voice low and rough, as though the words were being torn out of him. "You dove in without hesitation. You risked everything." I shook my head weakly, dizziness sweeping over me again. The sun beat down, the dock swayed beneath my bare feet, and the enormity of what had just happened pressed against my ribs until I could barely breathe. Anyone would have... No. The single word cut through the air like a blade. His eyes darkened, intense and unyielding. Not anyone. You. Inside him, a storm raged. Guilt clawed deeper than ever before. He had been downtown, locked in a tense standoff with men from a rival crew who had dared encroach near one of his warehouses off the strip. Words had been sharp, threats veiled but unmistakable, hands hovering near concealed weapons. He had walked away victorious but distracted, and in that absence his daughter had nearly died. Remorse was a living thing now, gnawing at his heart with teeth he could not escape. He had failed his wife by not protecting her. He had nearly failed Sophia the same way. And this woman, this thin, malnourished stranger who had arrived with nothing but a patched suitcase, had done what he could not. Yet beneath the remorse burned something new and terrifying, an overwhelming surge of feeling toward me. Love, sudden and violent, as though a dam inside him had cracked the moment he saw me kneeling beside his child, soaked and shaking but alive with fierce purpose. It was irrational, impossible, yet undeniable. He wanted to shield me from every cold desert night I had ever endured, from every skipped meal, from every humiliation poverty had inflicted. The need to keep me close, to never let me disappear back into the desperate world I had come from, was a fire consuming him from the inside out. Sirens sounded in the distance, growing louder. Someone on staff must have called emergency services. Within minutes, the manicured lawn filled with paramedics, security men emerging from hidden posts, Mrs. Ellis rushing out with blankets and wide, shocked eyes. The paramedics took Sophia gently from Michael's arms, wrapping her in a thermal blanket, checking vitals with calm efficiency. They turned to me next, but Michael waved them off with a sharp gesture. "She's fine. Focus on my daughter." Yet even as he spoke, his hand remained on my arm, firm, possessive, as though letting go might make me vanish. I stood dripping and trembling while they worked, numbness creeping through my limbs. My mind spun in circles. The cold water, Sophia's terrified eyes, the impossible warmth of Michael's touch. I felt small again, pitifully small, in my clinging thrift store dress beside this man whose world was galaxies away from mine. Mrs. Ellis approached with a thick towel, trying to drape it over my shoulders. "Miss Harper, you should go inside, change." Michael's voice cut across her, quiet but absolute. "She stays with me." Mrs. Ellis froze, eyes widening, then stepped back without another word. The paramedics finished their checks. Sophia was stable, lungs clear, just needing rest and observation at home. As they packed up, Michael finally released my arm, but only to shrug off his ruined suit jacket and wrap it around my shoulders. It smelled of expensive cologne and warm skin, swallowing my thin frame entirely. His eyes searched mine again, fierce and conflicted. "You're freezing." I managed a tiny nod, teeth chattering. The jacket's weight felt like armor and prison at once. He bent close, voice dropping so only I could hear. "You're never leaving this house. Not Sophia, not me." The words landed like a thunderclap inside my chest. Confusion flooded me, hot, dizzying, terrifying. I had spent years invisible, powerless, sleeping in coats because heat was too expensive, eating saltines for dinner because there was nothing else. Now this man, wealthy beyond imagining, powerful in ways I could sense but not name, was looking at me as though I were the only thing keeping his world from collapsing. I opened my mouth, but no sound came. Shock rendered me mute. My knees buckled slightly. He caught me instantly, one arm sliding around my waist to steady me. The contact sent a jolt through my frozen body. Warmth, strength, safety I had never known. Sophia, wrapped in blankets on a stretcher, reached out a small hand toward me. "Emily." Michael's expression softened impossibly at the sound of his daughter's voice saying my name. He guided me to walk beside the stretcher as the paramedics carried her toward the house. Every step felt dreamlike. The lawn seemed to tilt beneath me. I clutched his jacket tighter, afraid I would fall. Inside, cool air and soft lighting enveloped us. Staff hovered but kept their distance. Michael carried Sophia himself up the grand staircase to her bedroom, a princess haven of pale pinks and stuffed animals. He laid her gently on the bed, pulling soft blankets over her. I stood in the doorway dripping, afraid to track water on the plush carpet. He turned to me, eyes sweeping over my shivering form. "Stay here." Minutes later, a maid appeared with dry clothes, soft gray sweatpants and an oversized white cotton shirt that smelled freshly laundered. They were clearly from the house's guest supply, yet they fit better than anything I owned. Someone had guessed my size with unsettling accuracy. I changed in the adjoining bathroom, hands still shaking. When I emerged, Michael was sitting on the edge of Sophia's bed, holding her hand as she drifted into exhausted sleep. The sight pierced me. Powerful man, tender father, guilt and love warring openly on his face. He looked up as I stepped closer. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other across the dim room. The silence was thick, charged, almost unbearable. Finally, he stood, moving toward me with slow, deliberate steps. Up close, he seemed even taller, broader, the lines of grief and power etched deeper. He stopped inches away. "I meant what I said," he murmured, voice rough with everything he could not yet speak. "You're not going back to whatever life you had before. Not to cold nights, not to empty cupboards, not to anyone who ever made you feel small." Tears filled my eyes without warning. The kindness, the impossible, overwhelming kindness, tore at the walls I had built around years of humiliation and want. I felt exposed, raw, terrified of believing it could be real. I don't understand," I whispered, voice trembling. "Why me?" His hand rose again, cupping my cheek with aching gentleness. Inside him, the conflict raged harder than ever. Remorse for the danger his world carried, guilt for pulling an innocent deeper into it, and a love so fierce it frightened him with its intensity. "Because you saved the only light I have left," he said simply. "And because from the moment I saw you holding my daughter, I knew I would burn the world down before I let anyone take you from us." The words struck me like physical blows, beautiful, terrifying, impossible. My breath caught, dizziness returned. I swayed, and he caught me again, pulling me gently against his chest. For the first time in years, I let myself be held. The steady beat of his heart beneath my ear felt like the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted forever off its axis. Outside, somewhere beyond the guarded gates, rival shadows still circled, tense standoffs in parking lots, veiled warnings exchanged under neon lights. But in that quiet bedroom, with Sophia sleeping safely and Michael's arms around me, something new and fragile was born. I was still poor in every way that had ever mattered. I was still terrified. But for the first time, I was not alone. And the man holding me, powerful, tormented, suddenly and violently in love, was never going to let me be alone again. The days after the dock blurred into a strange, dreamlike rhythm. I woke each morning in the guest room of the family wing, larger than any place I had ever lived alone, with a king bed draped in cream linens, windows overlooking the lake, and a bathroom with heated floors that felt like sinful luxury against my bare feet. Someone had moved my few belongings from the staff quarters overnight. The patched suitcase now sat neatly in a walk-in closet beside rows of empty hangers waiting for clothes I did not own. Mrs. Ellis delivered the new rules with quiet efficiency the morning after the incident. My salary had been increased 5-fold, enough to pay Mom's medical debt in months, enough to send my brother through school without loans. My primary duty was now Sophia's care and safety whenever Michael was away. Sundays remained mine to visit family. Everything else belonged to this house. I nodded numbly, dizziness returning whenever I thought too hard about the change. Poverty had taught me to expect traps in kindness. This felt like the most elaborate trap of all. Sophia healed quickly in body, but slowly in spirit. The first few nights, she woke screaming from nightmares of dark water closing over her head. I was already there each time, curled on a chair beside her bed, or sometimes, when the cries grew too desperate, slipping under the covers to hold her until the shaking stopped. She began calling me Emmy, in a small, trusting voice that pierced me deeper than any paycheck ever could. I read to her for hours, picture books about brave animals, stories of faraway places I had only seen in library copies. We baked simple chocolate chip cookies in the massive kitchen, flour dusting her nose while she laughed for the first time since I had arrived. I took her on careful walks through the gardens, pointing out hummingbirds at the feeders, teaching her the names of desert flowers that somehow bloomed in manicured beds. Slowly, the solemn child began to unfurl. Michael watched it all from the edges. He was often gone, long days that started before dawn and ended after dark. I caught glimpses of him moving through the house like a storm contained in an expensive suit, phone pressed to his ear, low, urgent conversations in the study, suited men arriving and leaving with serious faces. Once, through a half-open door, I overheard raised voices, something about a warehouse near the airport, territory lines, a warning delivered. The words were measured, but the tension crackled like heat lightning. I backed away quietly, heart pounding, remembering the armed security at the gates. Yet every evening he appeared in Sophia's doorway at bedtime, silent and watchful. He never interrupted the stories, never spoke more than a soft goodnight. But his eyes softened when Sophia giggled at a silly voice I made for a character. And sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, those eyes rested on me with an intensity that stole my breath. The attraction grew in quiet moments, a brush of his hand against mine when passing a glass of water, the way he noticed when I skipped lunch, too accustomed to hunger, and quietly had trays sent to whatever room I was in with Sophia. Fresh fruit, sandwiches on bread I could never afford, things that made tears prick unexpectedly. One night, after Sophia finally slept without nightmares, I slipped into the hallway and found him waiting. The house was silent, moonlight spilling through tall windows onto marble floors. "You should be resting," he said softly. "I'm all right, sir." The honorific slipped out again, timid habit. His jaw tightened. "Michael." I swallowed. "Michael." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. "You haven't eaten dinner." "I wasn't hungry." A lie. Hunger was an old companion. I had learned to ignore it. His eyes searched mine, seeing too much. "You will eat. Every day. No more skipping meals because you're used to going without." The command was gentle but absolute. Tears threatened again, shame at being seen so clearly, gratitude that twisted painfully inside my chest. That same night, he led me downstairs to the kitchen himself. The chef had left plates warming, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, things that smelled like heaven. He served me with his own hands, sitting across the island while I ate slowly, afraid to seem greedy. When I finished, he poured me a glass of cold milk, something I had not tasted fresh in years, and watched until I drank it. Inside him, the conflict raged nightly. Guilt for the danger his world carried. He had stared down 2 men from a rival crew only yesterday in a casino parking garage, words sharp as knives, promises of consequences if lines were crossed again. Remorse for dragging me closer to that darkness. Yet the love that had ignited on the dock only burned hotter. Every smile he coaxed from Sophia through my care, every glimpse of my thin shoulders relaxing in safety, it fed the fire. He wanted to give me everything: security, warmth, a life without want. The need was violent, possessive, terrifying in its depth. For me, the days were a confusing whirl of abundance and fear. I woke sometimes in panic, certain it was a dream, that I would open my eyes to the sagging mattress in my old studio, the sound of roommates arguing over bills, the soft sheets, the quiet, the food always available. It felt stolen, undeserved. I caught myself hoarding snacks in drawers like a frightened animal, ashamed when a maid found them and quietly replaced them with fresh. Sophia's attachment grew fierce. She followed me everywhere, small hand often slipping into mine. "Emmy, will you stay forever?" she asked one afternoon while we built a blanket fort in the playroom. My throat closed. "As long as you need me, sweetheart." She considered this solemnly. "I need you always." The words broke something open inside me. I pulled her into my lap, holding her tight, tears silent on my cheeks. Poverty had taught me love was fragile, easily lost to circumstance. Now a child offered it freely, and a powerful man watched us with eyes that promised the same. One evening in early September, Michael found us in the garden at sunset. Sophia was chasing fireflies near the fountain, laughing in delight. I sat on a stone bench, exhausted from the day, but smiling at her joy. He sat beside me without speaking for a long time. The silence was companionable, yet charged. "She hasn't laughed like that since her mother," he said finally, voice rough. I turned to him, heart aching. "She's healing. She just needed to feel safe." His gaze met mine, raw and unguarded. "You gave her that. You gave me that." The air between us thickened. He reached out slowly, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. The touch lingered, thumb brushing my cheek. Inside him, the storm peaked. Remorse for his failures, gratitude that threatened to undo him, and love so intense it felt like violence. "I don't know how to repay what you've done," he whispered. "You don't owe me anything," I answered softly, voice trembling. "I love her." His eyes darkened. "And what about me?" The question hung, heavy with everything unspoken. My breath caught. Confusion, fear, longing, all collided until I felt dizzy again. Before I could answer, Sophia ran up, throwing her arms around both our necks. "Group hug!" Michael's arm slid around my waist, pulling me close. For one suspended moment, the three of us stayed like that, father, daughter, and the woman who had stumbled into their broken world with nothing but courage born of desperation. In the quiet that followed, as stars emerged over the lake, I felt the first threads of something new weaving around my heart. Poverty still whispered that I did not belong, that this would vanish like every good thing before it. But Michael's arm did not move from my waist, and Sophia's small hand stayed in mine. The bonds were deepening, fragile but unbreakable. And the man beside me, tormented, powerful, suddenly and completely in love, was already planning how to make forever real. By late September, the desert nights had begun to cool, the wind off the lake carrying a sharper edge that slipped through cracks like a reminder of harder times. I still woke some mornings convinced it had all been a dream, that I would find myself back in the cramped studio, heater broken again, curled under a thin blanket while sirens wailed outside. But the soft sheets, the quiet hum of central air, the scent of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen below, they were real, too real. The contrast tore at me daily, a violent ache between gratitude and terror that this abundance could vanish as suddenly as it had appeared. Sophia's nightmares had lessened, but her attachment to me had only grown fiercer. She sought me out constantly, small hand slipping into mine as we walked the gardens, head resting on my lap during afternoon stories. I poured everything I had into her. Patience honed from years of soothing younger siblings on empty stomachs. Gentleness born of knowing how fragile safety could be. And in giving, something inside me began to heal too. Slowly, painfully, like blood returning to numb fingers. Michael watched it all with an intensity that both comforted and unnerved me. His absences grew shorter. Meetings that once kept him away until midnight now ended earlier. I would find him in doorways, leaning against the frame with arms crossed, eyes soft as Sophia laughed at something I said. The staff noticed too. Mrs. Ellis's sharp glances, the way security men straightened when he appeared. Whispers followed me through the halls. The nanny who had saved the little girl, the one Mr. Russo could not seem to look away from. The first crack in the careful distance between us came on a quiet Thursday evening. Sophia had fallen asleep early, exhausted from a day spent splashing in the shallow end of the indoor pool. Her first tentative return to water since the accident, made possible only because I stayed in the pool with her, arms ready to catch. I lingered in her room longer than necessary, smoothing her curls, adjusting the nightlight shaped like a star. When I finally stepped into the hallway, Michael was there, waiting in the shadows. He did not speak at first, simply extended his hand. I took it, timid, trembling, because refusing felt impossible. His fingers closed around mine, warm and sure, and he led me downstairs to the glass-walled sitting room that overlooked the lake. Moonlight silvered the water. The house was silent around us. He poured 2 glasses of red wine from a bottle that probably cost more than my old monthly rent, handed me one without asking if I wanted it. I accepted, clutching the stem like a lifeline. "You were in the water with her today," he said quietly. I nodded, throat tight. She needed to know it could be safe again. His eyes met mine, dark and stormy. "You make everything safe for her, for both of us." The words hung between us, heavy with meaning I was afraid to examine. I sipped the wine, rich, velvety, worlds away from the cheap boxes I had once shared with roommates, and felt dizziness rise again. Not from alcohol, but from proximity, from the way he looked at me as though I were something precious and breakable. He stepped closer. "Tell me about before." The question startled me. No one here ever asked about before. I stared into the glass. "There's not much to tell, sir. Michael. I grew up in North Las Vegas. Money was always tight. After my dad left, Mom worked double shifts cleaning hotels on the Strip. I started nannying at 16 to help. We lost the house when I was 20. Since then, it's been apartments, roommates, counting quarters for gas." My voice wavered. "Some weeks, there was only ramen and whatever was marked down at the store. Winters were cold, summers hotter. I learned to sleep through hunger." The confession spilled out softly, timidly, because he had asked and because his silence felt safe. Shame burned my cheeks, humiliating to admit how low I had fallen in front of a man who owned private jets. But Michael's expression did not hold pity. It held fury, quiet, controlled, aimed not at me, but at every circumstance that had ever hurt me. He set his glass down and closed the distance. One hand rose to cup my face, thumb tracing the hollow beneath my cheekbone where weight had not yet returned. "Never again," he said, voice rough. "No more cold nights. No more empty cupboards. No more making yourself small to survive." Tears filled my eyes. The kindness was unbearable. His other hand settled at my waist, pulling me gently closer. I went willingly, drawn by a force I could no longer resist. When his lips finally met mine, the kiss was not gentle. It was sudden, desperate, consuming. All the careful restraint he had shown for weeks shattered. His mouth claimed mine with a hunger that stole my breath, hands sliding into my hair, tilting my head to deepen the kiss. I gasped against him, dizzy with shock and need I had never allowed myself to feel. My own hands clutched his shirt, expensive fabric bunching under desperate fingers, as though he were the only solid thing in a spinning world. He backed me against the glass wall, bodies pressed together, the cool surface at my back contrasting with the heat of him. The kiss turned fierce, almost punishing in its intensity, as though he were trying to pour every unspoken promise into it. I matched him, timid at first, then with a passion born of years denied tenderness. Poverty had taught me to take nothing. Now I took everything he offered. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. His hands trembled where they framed my face. "I've wanted to do that since the dock," he confessed, voice raw. "Every day since. Watching you with Sophia, seeing you smile when you think no one notices, it's been tearing me apart." Inside him, the conflict raged harder than ever. Guilt for pulling me deeper into his dangerous world. He had stared down 3 men from a rival crew only that afternoon in a casino valet lot. Words sharp, threats veiled but clear, hands inches from weapons. Remorse for the risks he could not eliminate. Yet the love was a wildfire now, burning away restraint. He wanted me with a violence that frightened him, wanted to shield me, possess me, erase every scar poverty had left. For me, the kiss cracked open something long buried. Desire, yes, but deeper. A longing for belonging I had never dared name. Tears slipped down my cheeks as he kissed them away, murmuring my name like a prayer. We did not go further that night. He pulled back with visible effort. pressing one last gentle kiss to my forehead. "Not like this," he whispered. "Not when you're still half convinced it will disappear." But the dam had broken. After that, the passion ignited everywhere. In stolen moments when Sophia napped, in lingering touches in empty hallways, in nights when he came to my room after she slept and held me until dawn. The lovemaking was fierce, possessive, sometimes almost overwhelming in its intensity. He worshipped every inch of my body as though making up for years of neglect, hands gentle even when desire turned urgent. I matched him with a desperation I did not know I possessed, clinging to him as though he could anchor me against the terror that this was temporary. Yet fear lingered. I woke some nights gasping, convinced I was back in the cold studio, his warmth a cruel dream. He would pull me closer, murmuring assurances until I slept again. The contrast between my past and this present tore at me daily. Servants preparing meals while I once rationed cereal. Heated floors while I once layered socks to survive winter. The unfairness of it, of having nothing and then everything, because one man decided I was worth saving, confused and numbed me. Michael's torment grew alongside the passion. Every rival glance in a parking garage, every tense exchange near a construction site reminded him of the danger circling closer. He doubled security, shortened trips, but the guilt gnawed. He had saved me from poverty, only to risk dragging me into violence. Still, the love burned brighter. In quiet moments, watching Sophia sleep between us after a nightmare, or sharing coffee at dawn, he would look at me with eyes that held everything: remorse, gratitude, fierce possession. "You're mine now," he said one night, voice low and absolute as he traced patterns on my skin. "And I'm yours, whatever comes." I believed him with every desperate beat of my heart. The poor girl who had arrived with nothing had become essential to a powerful man and his healing daughter. The passion between us was no longer hidden. It was a living flame, intense and consuming, promising to burn away every shadow of my past. But even as we clung to each other, the world outside the gates grew darker, and the love that had ignited so suddenly was about to be tested in ways none of us could foresee. October arrived with a deceptive calm. The desert days remained warm, but the nights turned crisp, the wind whispering through palm fronds like warnings I could not yet read. The passion between Michael and me had settled into a rhythm both exquisite and terrifying. Stolen hours when Sophia slept, whispered conversations in moonlit rooms, touches that lingered longer than necessary. He had begun leaving small gifts: a soft cashmere sweater when he noticed me shiver, a delicate gold necklace with a tiny star pendant because Sophia said I was her wishing star. Each one felt like a brand, beautiful, but reminding me how far I had fallen into his world. Yet cracks were forming. It started with small things: extra security men patrolling the grounds at odd hours, Michael's phone buzzing late into the night, his voice low and clipped in the study. Once, I woke to find him gone from my bed, only to discover him on the balcony, staring at the dark lake with jaw clenched, knuckles white on the railing. When I approached, he pulled me against him without a word, holding so tightly it almost hurt. The first real shadow fell on a Tuesday afternoon. I had taken Sophia to a quiet park near the lake, cleared by security, of course. She was swinging higher than ever, laughing with abandon, when a black SUV slowed on the nearby road. Two men inside stared too long. One lifted a phone, camera aimed our way. My stomach dropped. Old instincts from leaner days screamed danger. I called Sophia back immediately, heart pounding, and hurried us to the waiting car. The driver's face was grim as he sped away. That evening, Michael listened to the report without expression, but his eyes turned cold as winter. "No more outings until I say," he said quietly. The gentleness he reserved for me and Sophia was gone, replaced by something hard and lethal. Inside him, the remorse deepened to a gnawing wound. He had pulled me from poverty's grip only to expose me to worse. Every rival glance in a business meeting, every veiled warning from out-of-state crews pushing into his territory reminded him of the cost. Just that morning, he had faced 3 men in a deserted construction site off the Strip, words sharp, postures aggressive, hands hovering near belts. He had stared them down, voice calm but promising consequences if they came closer. The standoff ended without blows, but the message was clear. They were testing boundaries. For me, the fear crept in slowly, then all at once. I began noticing things. Cars that followed too long on the rare drive to visit Mom. Anonymous envelopes left at the gate that security intercepted. A single dead rose on the windshield of the staff car one dawn. Each incident left me dizzy, numb, memories of past helplessness surging back, eviction notices, empty refrigerators, nights when the power was cut and I huddled under every blanket I owned. One night after another late return, Michael found me in the kitchen, staring at a cup of untouched tea. My hands shook so badly, the liquid rippled. "They're watching us," I whispered when he asked. "Because of you, because of what you do." He froze, guilt flashing across his face like lightning. Then he was on his knees before me, taking my cold hands in his warm ones. "Yes," he admitted, voice raw. "There are people who want what I have, who would use Sophia or you to hurt me." Terror flooded me. I pulled away, standing on unsteady legs. "I was safe being poor," I said, voice breaking. "Invisible. No one wanted to hurt me because I had nothing." The words hung cruel and true. Tears spilled down my cheeks, shame at my ingratitude, horror at the danger I had brought to Sophia by staying. Michael rose slowly, torment etched deep. "You think poverty was safe?" His voice cracked. "Cold nights with no heat? Skipping meals until you were dizzy? Working yourself to exhaustion because no one would help? That wasn't safe, Emily. That was slow death." He stepped closer, eyes burning. "I won't lose you to either world, not to hunger, not to them." But the threats escalated. A week later, while Michael was in a tense meeting downtown, another confrontation, this time in an underground parking garage where words turned heated and promises of retaliation hung heavy. A package arrived at the gate. Security opened it away from the house. Inside was a child's swimsuit, the same style Sophia wore, slashed to ribbons. I saw it only in a photo Michael showed me later, his face pale with rage. That night, he held me so tightly I could feel his heart hammering. "They won't touch her," he vowed against my hair. "They won't touch you." Yet the fear took root. I began checking locks obsessively, jumping at shadows. Old poverty nightmares mixed with new ones, waking gasping, convinced men were in the house, or that Sophia had vanished into dark water again. Michael would pull me close, murmuring assurances until I slept, but I felt his own tension, the way he lay awake listening for sounds that did not belong. The breaking point came on an overcast afternoon in mid-October. I had gone to the gate to collect a delivery for Sophia, new books I had ordered with money that still felt unreal. The guard was momentarily distracted. A car pulled up outside the fence, window rolling down. A man I did not know leaned out, camera flashing rapidly. "Tell Russo we're watching," he called, voice mocking. "Pretty new family he's got." The gate guard moved fast, but the car sped away. I stood frozen, package slipping from numb fingers, dizziness crashing over me so violently I sank to my knees on the gravel drive. Pain shot through my legs, tears blurred everything. The unfairness of it, escaping poverty's slow grind only to face this new terror, tore at my heart until I could barely breathe. Michael arrived minutes later, alerted by security cameras. He was out of the car before it fully stopped, dropping beside me on the drive without caring about his expensive suit. His hands framed my face, eyes wild with fear and fury. "Emily, look at me." I could not. Sobs choked me, raw, humiliating sounds born of every injustice I had ever endured. The cold nights without heat, the skipped meals, the exhaustion, and now this. Men who wanted to hurt a child, to wound him. He pulled me into his arms right there on the gravel, rocking me like a child. "I'm sorry," he whispered over and over, voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Inside him, the remorse was a living torment. He had built an empire to protect his family, yet here I was, shaking in his arms because of it. The love that had ignited on the dock now burned with protective fury. He would end this, whatever the cost. That night, he sat me down in his study, the room that smelled of leather and power. Security footage played on a screen, cars circling the estate, faces of men he recognized from rival crews. He did not hide it anymore. "These people want territory," he said quietly. "They think hurting what I love will force me to give it." I stared, horror and curiosity warring. "What will you do?" His eyes met mine, dark, tormented, resolute. "Whatever I have to keep you safe, both of you." He reached for my hand, pulling me into his lap like I weighed nothing. The kiss that followed was fierce, almost desperate, a claim and a promise. I clung to him, fear and love colliding until I could not tell them apart. The threat was rising, circling closer. Outside, rivals tested boundaries in shadowed meetings and slow drives past the gates. Inside, our passion burned hotter to drown the fear. But the storm was coming, and the man who loved me with violent intensity was preparing to meet it head-on. I was no longer the invisible poor girl. I was his, and that made me a target. The realization terrified me more than any cold night ever had. The decision to leave came abruptly, in the gray light of a late October dawn. Michael woke me before sunrise, his hand gentle on my shoulder, but his eyes hard with resolve. "Pack light," he said quietly. "We're going north, today." I did not ask why. The escalating threats had become a constant hum beneath every moment. The strange cars, the slashed swimsuit, the feeling of eyes always watching. Sophia sensed it too, clinging tighter, asking why the guards looked angry. By midday, we were airborne in Michael's private helicopter. Sophia pressed between us, wide-eyed at the view of the shrinking city. The flight north took us over endless desert, fading into forested hills. We landed on a private clearing beside a secluded lake house in Door County, Wisconsin. Michael's hidden retreat, built years ago with his late wife, but rarely visited since her death. The house was smaller than the mansion, but no less luxurious. Warm cedar walls, stone fireplaces, windows framing autumn-colored trees and still water. No neighbors for miles. Security men arrived separately, taking positions in the woods. For the first time in weeks, I breathed easier. The days there felt stolen. Sophia rediscovered joy, collecting colorful leaves, skipping stones on the lake, baking apple pies with me in the cozy kitchen. Michael relaxed in subtle ways, sleeves rolled up, laughing as he pushed her on a tire swing, joining us for board games by the fire. Our nights were passionate, almost reverent. He held me as though afraid I would slip away, whispering promises against my skin. But the peace was fragile. On the fourth evening, storm clouds gathered early. Rain lashed the windows as we finished dinner. Sophia had fallen asleep upstairs after stories. Michael and I sat by the fireplace, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder. The quiet was perfect, until his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, face tightening. "Perimeter breach," he said low. "Stay here." He kissed me once, hard, urgent, then disappeared toward the front. I sat frozen, heart pounding. Minutes stretched. Rain hammered the roof. Then, sharp sounds outside, muffled but unmistakable. Shouts, a crash of glass downstairs. Terror flooded me, cold and dizzying. Memories of past helplessness surged. Nights alone in the dark when power was cut, praying no one would break in for the little I had. Now the danger was real, aimed at us because of who Michael was. I ran upstairs to Sophia's room. She was sitting up, eyes wide. "Emmy, what's that noise?" "We're playing a hiding game," I whispered, voice trembling but steady for her. "Come on." Michael had shown me the panic room days earlier, a reinforced space behind the master closet. I scooped Sophia up, her small body shaking, and hurried there. The latch clicked open. I set her inside on the small cot with emergency supplies. "Stay quiet, sweetheart. Lock it from inside if you need to. I'll be right back." Her tears broke me, but I closed the door, hearing the lock engage. Downstairs, chaos. I grabbed the pistol Michael kept in the nightstand. Shown to me once, safety explained. My hands shook violently, but I moved to the hallway overlooking the stairs. 3 men in dark clothing had breached the front. Security lights flickered. I heard grunts, thuds, guards engaging outside. One intruder appeared at the top of the stairs, tall and masked, gun raised. He saw me. Time slowed. Horror paralyzed me. Dizziness, numbness spreading from my chest. Poverty had left me powerless. Now, life or death rested in my thin, trembling hands. He raised his weapon. I fired. The recoil jolted through my arms, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The man staggered, clutching his leg, weapon clattering down the stairs. He cursed, collapsing. "Armed female upstairs," he shouted. Footsteps pounded. 2 more appeared. I fired again, wild, missing, but it bought seconds. Then gunfire from below, our guards converging. The fight was brief, brutal in sound, but contained. Shouts, thuds, then silence. A guard I recognized appeared, weapon lowered. "Clear, Miss Harper. You okay?" I sank to the floor, gun slipping from numb fingers, body shaking uncontrollably. Tears came hot and silent. Sophia. I stumbled to the panic room, hands fumbling the latch. "It's me, baby, open up." The door cracked. Sophia flew into my arms, sobbing. I held her tightly, rocking on the floor, both of us trembling. Minutes later, Michael burst in, hair disheveled, shirt torn, eyes wild until they found us. He dropped beside us, pulling us both into his arms with desperate strength. "You're safe," he rasped, voice breaking. "Both of you." He checked us frantically, no injuries, then held us as though we were the only real things left in his world. Guards secured the house. 1 intruder wounded and detained, others fled. Michael's face was stone as he spoke to his men, but when he returned to us, it crumpled. In the master bedroom later, storm still raging outside, he held me while Sophia finally slept between us, exhausted. "I almost lost you both tonight," he whispered against my hair, voice raw with torment. Guilt tore at him anew. He had brought us here for safety, yet danger followed. Remorse for his life's shadows, for risking us, warred with fierce gratitude that I had protected his daughter again. I clung to him, tears silent. The adrenaline crash left me dizzy, numb, pain radiating through my arms from the recoil. Poverty's old helplessness mixed with tonight's terror, unfair, always unfair, that survival demanded such violence from someone who had only ever wanted gentleness. Then, in the quiet, something shifted inside me, a realization that had been growing unnoticed amid the chaos. I took his hand, pressing it to my stomach. "Michael," I whispered, voice trembling with new fear and wonder. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the storm-lit room. His breath caught, eyes widened, shock, then overwhelming joy crashing against guilt. He pulled me closer, careful now, hands splayed protectively over the place where new life grew. "A baby," he breathed, voice thick. Tears, actual tears, glistened in his eyes. The love that had ignited months ago now exploded into something deeper, fierce, and eternal. A child, his and mine, proof that beauty could rise from danger. Yet the torment intensified. Remorse for the world he would bring this child into. Determination to end the threat forever. He kissed me softly, reverently, then pressed his lips to my stomach. "I'll protect you all," he vowed, voice breaking, "with everything I am." Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, we held each other, 3 lives, now 4, bound by sacrifice and love that had survived the unthinkable. The attack had come, and we had endured. But the revelation changed everything. Hope, fragile but fierce, bloomed amid the fear. Michael's love, already burning, became absolute. And I, who had once had nothing, now carried the future in my womb. The threat was not over, but neither were we. The flight back to Nevada was silent except for the steady thrum of the helicopter rotors. Sophia slept against my shoulder, exhausted from tears and the long night. Michael piloted, knuckles white on the controls, face carved from stone. I sat beside him, one hand resting protectively on my still flat stomach, the other clutching his sleeve when turbulence rocked us. The pregnancy, barely weeks along, was a fragile secret light in the darkness, but the attack had cast long shadows over it. We landed on the mansion helipad just after dawn. The estate had been transformed overnight. More guards, new floodlights, reinforced gates. Michael carried Sophia inside while I followed on unsteady legs, dizziness lingering from shock and lack of sleep. He tucked her into bed, lingering longer than usual, brushing curls from her forehead with trembling fingers. When he finally emerged, his eyes met mine, tormented, resolute. "They found us," he said quietly in the hallway. "Someone told them where we were." The words landed like blows. Betrayal from inside his own circle. Guilt twisted his features. He had promised safety, yet danger had followed us even to his most hidden place. Over the next days, the mansion became a fortress under siege, from within as much as without. Michael barely slept, coordinating with his most trusted men in the study late into the nights. I brought him coffee, sat silently when he needed quiet, held him when words failed. The passion between us turned fierce and desperate, nights when he pulled me close as though confirming I was still real, love-making urgent and tender, his hands reverent over the place where our child grew. But the counterstrike was coming. Michael's network moved with ruthless efficiency. Information flowed in, names, locations, patterns of the rival crew that had sent the intruders. He fed carefully chosen details to contacts in law enforcement, anonymous tips that could not trace back. Within a week, coordinated actions began. Warehouses searched, assets frozen, key figures questioned. One evening, he returned from a tense downtown meeting, another confrontation, this time in a dimly lit restaurant parking lot, where words had been exchanged with cold precision, postures rigid, threats veiled but unmistakable. He found me in the nursery, reading to Sophia. His suit was rumpled, eyes haunted. "They're crumbling," he said later when we were alone, "but there's more." He showed me files on a secure tablet, evidence pointing higher. Not just the rival crew, but a federal agent, someone with access, who had leaked the Wisconsin location. Corruption rotting from inside the system meant to uphold justice. The revelation sickened him. Remorse deepened to an unbearable weight. His world's shadows had tainted even the light. He paced the study, hands raking through his hair. "I brought you into this," he said, voice breaking. "You and Sophia and our baby. I swore to protect you, and I keep failing." I went to him, taking his face in my hands. "You didn't fail. We're here. We're alive." His eyes searched mine, love and guilt warring violently. He pulled me against him, holding so tightly I could feel his heartbeat. "I'll end it," he whispered. "All of it." The final piece fell into place when the corrupt agent's name surfaced definitively. Bank records, encrypted messages, proof undeniable. Michael's plan crystallized. Expose the agent fully, let the system devour its own rot, while his indirect tips finished dismantling the rivals. But the agent knew he was cornered. Threats escalated. A drive-by near the estate gates, more slashed items left as warnings. Fear gripped me anew. Morning sickness mixed with terror, dizziness that left me clinging to furniture, tears when I thought Michael wasn't looking. One afternoon, alone in the garden, while Sophia napped under guard, I received a call from an unknown number. The voice was distorted. "Tell Russo to back off, or the pretty nanny and the kid won't make it to Christmas." I dropped the phone, sinking to my knees among the roses, sobs tearing from my chest. The unfairness crushed me. Escaping poverty's slow starvation only to face this calculated cruelty. Hands pressed to my stomach, I wept for the child who deserved better than fear. Michael found me there. He knelt, gathering me close without questions at first, letting me cry against his chest. When I told him, rage flashed across his face, cold, lethal, but he banked it for me. "They won't touch you," he said, voice steel wrapped in velvet. "I swear on everything I am." The decision came from me, unexpected even to myself. "I'll testify," I said that night, voice soft but steady. "If it helps end this, if it protects our baby." He stared, shock giving way to awe and deeper torment. "Emily, no, it's too dangerous." But I stood firm, born of poverty's resilience, of a mother's new, fierce protectiveness. "They threatened our child. I won't hide anymore." His conflict was visible, pride in my courage warring with terror of losing me. He pulled me close, kissing me with desperate intensity. "You're the strongest person I've ever known," he whispered. "But if anything happens to you—" "It won't," I promised, though fear trembled inside me. Arrangements were made swiftly. Protected testimony, identity safeguards, relocation if needed. I spoke to investigators in a secure room, voice timid at first, but growing stronger as I recounted the threats, the attack, the fear. Michael waited outside, pacing like a caged lion. The fallout was swift. The agent was arrested. Headlines careful, details sparse, but the corruption exposed. Rival operations collapsed under simultaneous actions. Searches, seizures, arrests. The crew that had targeted us scattered or vanished. Michael's indirect hand remained invisible, but the results were absolute. In the quiet aftermath, he held me on the balcony overlooking the lake, hands splayed over my stomach. "It's over," he said, voice thick with emotion. "The main threats, gone." Relief flooded me, but so did exhaustion. Tears came again, release after months of tension. He wiped them gently, eyes shining with his own. "You were extraordinary," he murmured, testifying, carrying our child through all this. "I don't deserve you." I touched his face. "You saved me first, from a life that was killing me slowly." His kiss was deep, passionate, sealing promises. The love that had ignited on a dock now burned steady and unbreakable, forged in fire, purified by sacrifice. Yet even as peace settled, Michael's inner torment lingered. He had protected us, but at what cost to his soul? Remorse for the shadows he could not fully escape warred with joy at the family growing around him. I felt the baby move for the first time that night, a flutter like wings. Michael's hand was there instantly, eyes wide with wonder. In that quiet moment, with Sophia sleeping safely down the hall and threats crumbling outside, we allowed ourselves to believe in a future. The counterstrike had succeeded. Corruption exposed, rivals broken. But the deepest healing was happening within us. Poor girl no longer poor, powerful man no longer alone, both forever changed by love that had refused to let go. November arrived with a gentleness that felt almost cruel after everything we had endured. The desert winds softened, carrying the scent of rain that rarely fell. The mansion, once a fortress under siege, began to breathe again. Guards still present but less visible, new cameras discreetly installed, the gates reinforced but no longer feeling like prison walls. The immediate threats had collapsed, the rival crew scattered, their leadership in custody, the corrupt agent awaiting trial. For the first time in months, the world outside the gates seemed distant. Inside, something fragile and beautiful began to grow. Sophia, now 6.5, had started calling me Mommy without hesitation, soft, certain, as though the word had always belonged to me. Each time she said it, my heart cracked open wider, letting in light I had never dared hope for. I was still thin, ribs faintly visible beneath skin that had begun to soften with proper meals, but the hollows under my eyes were filling, the constant dizziness fading. I no longer hoarded food in drawers. The pantry was always full, and the staff prepared whatever I craved without question. The contrast still jarred me. Once I had counted quarters for a loaf of day-old bread. Now, fresh croissants arrived warm every morning. The unfairness of it lingered, a quiet ache beneath the gratitude. Michael watched the change in me with eyes that never seemed to tire of looking. He had begun leaving work earlier, returning before dinner to sit with us at the table, laughing when Sophia smeared sauce on her nose. Nights were quieter now, the passion between us deepening rather than burning wildly. Slow, deliberate lovemaking that felt like worship, his hands reverent over the gentle curve that had begun to show at my waist. He spoke to our unborn child in whispers, voice thick with wonder and lingering guilt. One clear November evening, he took my hand after Sophia was asleep and led me up to the rooftop terrace. The city glittered below us, a sea of lights stretching to the horizon. The air was cool but not biting. He wrapped me in a cashmere blanket anyway, as though I might still be cold from those long-ago winters. He stood behind me, arms around my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. For a long time we simply watched the lights, the silence comfortable yet charged. "I have something for you," he said finally, voice low. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, not a ring, but something else. When he opened it, I saw a delicate key and 2 platinum cards. "The key is to a penthouse downtown," he said softly, overlooking the strip. "I bought it years ago but never used it. Now it's ours. Yours, mine, Sophia's, and the baby's. A place to go when we want to be alone, or when you need to see your family without driving back late." I stared at the key, heart pounding. The cards had my name embossed on them, connected to accounts I could not even comprehend. "I'm not asking you to marry me yet," he continued, voice rough with emotion. "I'm asking you to build a life with me, officially, not as the nanny who saved my daughter, not as the woman I pulled from poverty, as my partner, in everything." Tears blurred my vision. The words were too large, too beautiful for the girl who had once slept in a coat because the heat was too expensive. I turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I was nothing when you found me," I whispered, voice trembling. Thin, hungry, invisible. I thought love was something that happened to other people. And now I have this. You, Sophia, our baby. It feels like a dream I'm afraid to believe in. His eyes shone with unshed tears. "It's not a dream, and I'll spend my life making sure you never have to doubt it again." He kissed me then, slow, deep, full of everything he could not yet say. When we broke apart, he pressed the key into my hand and closed my fingers around it. "I want you to know you're free," he said. "If you ever want to leave, you can. The accounts are yours alone, no strings. I never want you to feel trapped, not by money, not by me. The generosity tore at me. Poverty had taught me that freedom was a myth. Everything came with a price. Yet here he stood, offering me an escape from the very life he had given me, because he loved me enough to risk losing me. I rose on my toes, kissing him fiercely, pouring every ounce of gratitude and love into it. I'm not going anywhere, I breathed against his lips. I choose you, every day, forever. That night we made love on the rooftop under a blanket of stars, slow and reverent, his hands tracing the faint curve of my belly where our child grew. Afterward, he held me close, whispering promises into my hair, promises of safety, of family, of a future unshadowed by fear. The calm felt almost too perfect, and part of me waited for the other shoe to drop. Old habits died hard. I still woke sometimes in the dark, heart racing, convinced I was back in the cold studio with nothing but a thin blanket and worry. Michael would feel the shift, pull me against his chest, and murmur until I slept again. Yet the love between us only deepened. He began involving me in small decisions, choosing paint colors for the nursery we were preparing, planning a quiet Thanksgiving with my mother and brother. The disparity between our worlds still stung at times. When I saw the price tags on baby clothes he ordered without blinking, or when I caught my reflection in a mirror, healthier now, but still carrying the faint marks of years of hunger. The unfairness of it lingered, a quiet ache beneath the joy. One afternoon, while Sophia napped, Michael found me in the nursery, staring at a tiny pair of shoes he had bought. They were soft leather, impossibly small and expensive. I traced them with trembling fingers. I used to wear shoes with holes in the soles, I whispered. I'd stuff cardboard in them so the pavement wouldn't cut my feet. He stepped behind me, arms wrapping around my waist, chin on my shoulder. Never again, he said, voice rough with emotion. Our child will never know that pain, and neither will you. His words were a vow and a wound at once. Gratitude so deep it hurt, love so fierce it scared me. I turned in his arms, pressing my face to his chest. I love you, I said, voice small but steady, more than I knew I could love anyone. He kissed my forehead, eyes shining. And I love you, with everything I am, every day more. In that quiet room, surrounded by soft blankets and the scent of baby powder, the calm felt real. Threats had receded. The future stretched before us, bright, uncertain, but ours. Michael's torment had not vanished. He still carried guilt for the shadows he could not fully escape, but it was tempered now by hope. The child growing inside me was proof that love could redeem even the darkest past. We stood there, wrapped in each other, as the sun set over the lake. The rooftop promise still echoed in my heart. I choose you. Every day, forever. And for the first time, I believed it might be true. December's first week brought an unnatural stillness to the estate, as though the desert itself were holding its breath. The holidays approached quietly. Sophia's excitement over decorating the Christmas tree, my mother's improving health reports, the gentle swell of my belly, now impossible to hide beneath loose sweaters. Michael had begun speaking of names for the baby in hushed, reverent tones at night, his hand always finding the curve as though to reassure himself it was real. The calm we had waited for felt, at last, within reach. Then the world cracked open again. It began with a late-night call Michael took in his study. I was half asleep when he slipped from bed, but the tension in his shoulders woke me fully. I padded to the door, listening to his low, controlled voice turn colder with every word. Bring him here, now. He emerged minutes later, face carved from granite. Stay with Sophia, he said quietly, kissing my forehead. Lock the door behind me. Fear fluttered in my chest, but I obeyed, heart pounding as I heard the front doors open and close, voices murmuring below. I did not sleep. Hours passed. Sophia stirred once, calling for water. I brought it with trembling hands, singing softly until she settled. Dawn was graying the windows when Michael finally returned to our room. He looked as though he had aged years in a single night. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. I touched his shoulder. Michael? When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed, devastated in a way I had never seen. It was Vincent, he said, voice barely audible. My brother. The words did not make sense at first. Vincent, Michael's younger brother, his second in command, the man who had stood at his side since they were boys, the one who had flown to Wisconsin after the attack, face pale with worry, promising vengeance. Michael's voice broke as he continued. He orchestrated everything. The leaks, the attack on the lake house, the corrupt agent, he paid him. All of it to push me out. He thought I'd gone soft, that protecting you and Sophia made me weak. Shock crashed over me, cold and dizzying. I clutched the blanket, nausea rising. Vincent had sat at our dinner table, smiled at Sophia, brought her gifts. The betrayal was a knife twisted deep. Michael stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. He's downstairs. Guards have him. He wants to talk. The torment in him was visible. Love for the brother who had once been his closest ally, warring with rage at the lives nearly lost. Guilt flooded him anew. He had trusted Vincent implicitly, and that trust had almost cost us everything. I have to face him, he said, voice raw. Stay here. But I could not. The need to understand, to protect what we had built, pulled me after him. I followed at a distance, bare feet silent on the marble, until I stood hidden in the shadowed hallway overlooking the study. Vincent sat in a chair, wrists restrained, not harshly, but enough. His face was bruised, eyes defiant yet haunted. Michael stood before him, towering, every line of his body vibrating with barely contained fury. You tried to kill my family, Michael said, voice low and lethal. My daughter, the woman carrying my child, your own blood. Vincent's laugh was bitter. You left us vulnerable, Mike, parading that nanny around, getting soft. The crews were laughing behind your back. I did what you wouldn't, took steps to protect the empire. Michael's fists clenched. By sending armed men into my home? By terrifying a 6-year-old girl? Vincent's gaze flicked upward, finding me in the shadows. Something flickered, regret perhaps, or calculation. She's the problem, he said coldly. Some broke girl from the wrong side of town. You think she belongs here? She's made you weak. The words struck like blows. Old shame surged, poverty's voice whispering I was unworthy, that I had always been unworthy. Tears burned my eyes. Dizziness swayed me against the wall. Michael's roar was quiet but terrifying. Don't speak her name. Don't look at her. He stepped closer to Vincent, the air crackling. For a moment, I thought he would strike, end it with his own hands. The inner tearing was visible. Love for the brother who had shared his childhood grief after their parents died, warring with the need to protect the family he had now. Vincent's defiance cracked. Finish it then, he said, voice breaking, like Dad would have. The words hung. Michael froze, memories crashing, their father's brutal world, the cycle of betrayal and vengeance that had claimed him. Then I moved. I do not know what possessed me. Perhaps the child inside me, perhaps the love that had grown fierce enough to face anything. I stepped into the room, visibly pregnant now, placing myself between the brothers. Michael's eyes widened in horror. Emily, no. I faced Vincent, voice soft but steady. You almost killed Sophia. You terrified a little girl who had already lost her mother. For power. Vincent looked away, shame flickering. I turned to Michael, tears streaming. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't become what he wants. Don't make our children grow up knowing their father killed his own brother. Break the cycle. For us." Michael's face crumpled. The conflict tore him visibly. Rage, love, remorse, colliding until he shook with it. He looked at Vincent, eyes wet. "You're dead to me," he said finally, voice hoarse. "Leave this city. Leave this state. If I ever see you again, I won't stop next time." Guards moved in. Vincent was led away, banished, not killed. The mercy cost Michael dearly. He sank into a chair after the door closed, head in hands, shoulders shaking with silent grief. I went to him, kneeling, pulling him against me. He clung like a drowning man, the powerful Mafia boss reduced to raw vulnerability in my arms. "I lost my brother tonight," he whispered. "You saved your soul," I answered, tears falling into his hair. "And our children's future." The betrayal shattered something in both of us. For me, it reopened old wounds, proof that kindness could be feigned, that safety was illusion. I wept for the unfairness, escaping poverty's grind only to face family treachery from within wealth's walls. For Michael, the loss was profound. Vincent had been his last tie to childhood, to the man he might have been without this life. Guilt and grief warred with relief. We were safe now, truly safe. We held each other through the night, passion absent, only comfort. In the morning light, he kissed my belly, eyes fierce with new determination. "No more cycles," he vowed. "Only us, only forward." The shocking betrayal had nearly destroyed us, but in choosing mercy, at my plea, for our future, Michael broke the pattern that had defined his world. The cost was immense. The healing would take time. But the love between us, forged in fire and betrayal, emerged stronger, passionate, protective, eternal. We were still standing, and the family we were building would know a different legacy. The weeks after Vincent's banishment passed in a haze of grief and quiet rebuilding. Michael moved through the days like a man carrying an invisible wound, smiling for Sophia, holding me closer at night, but his eyes often distant, haunted by the brother he had lost twice, once to ambition, once to mercy. The inner tearing was relentless, remorse for not seeing the betrayal sooner, guilt for the mercy that had cost him family, and a fierce, burning determination to protect what remained. For me, the pregnancy advanced steadily, the baby's kicks a constant reminder of life insisting on hope amid pain. Yet the betrayal reopened old scars. I woke some nights gasping, convinced Vincent's shadow lingered in the halls, or that poverty's cold grip would return to claim me. Michael would pull me against him, whispering until the fear ebbed, but I saw the toll it took on him, how my nightmares fed his guilt. Christmas came softly. We decorated a smaller tree in the family room, Sophia's laughter the brightest light. Michael surprised us with a trip to a quiet mountain cabin, no security beyond a discreet team, for New Year's. Snow fell thick and silent, blanketing the world in white. We built snowmen, drank hot chocolate by the fire, made love with the windows open to the cold air, passion fierce and healing. On New Year's Eve, under a sky full of stars, Michael took my hand as we stood on the cabin porch. "I want to marry you," he said quietly. "Not when everything is perfect. Now. Because life isn't perfect, but what we have is." Tears froze on my cheeks. "Yes," I whispered. "Always yes." We married in early spring, a small ceremony in the garden overlooking the lake. Sophia carried flowers. My mother and brother sat teary-eyed in the front row. I wore a simple white dress that skimmed my rounded belly. Michael's eyes never left mine as we spoke vows promising forever, no matter the shadows. Our son was born in late May, a healthy boy with Michael's dark hair and my green eyes. We named him Luca, after Michael's grandfather, a nod to roots and new beginnings. The years that followed were not without challenge. Michael slowly withdrew from the shadowed parts of his empire, steering everything toward legitimate ventures, resorts, real estate, charities that helped families like mine had once been. Old rivals tested boundaries occasionally. A tense meeting in a downtown cafe, words sharp but resolved without violence. But Michael's reputation for fairness and unbreakable family loyalty held. Sophia grew into a confident young girl, calling me mom without hesitation. Luca toddled after her, both children surrounded by love they never doubted. One summer evening, years later, we gathered in the backyard for a simple barbecue. Friends, family, laughter under string lights. Michael hung a new crayon drawing on the wall of his study. 4 stick figures holding hands. Him, me, Sophia, Luca. It replaced a priceless painting, just as he had once promised. Later, under the same stars that had witnessed our vows, Michael pulled me close. "You saved me," he whispered, voice rough with emotion, "from becoming the man my father was, from a life without this." I touched his face, tears shining. "And you saved me from a life without love." Our kiss was deep, passionate, the same fire that had ignited years ago, now tempered with time and trials, stronger, eternal. We had chosen forgiveness over vengeance, mercy over the cycle of blood. Wealth had not bought our happiness. Poverty had not defined our worth. Love, fierce, redemptive, colorblind, and class-blind, had bridged every divide. In quiet moments, I still marveled. The girl who once slept in a coat to stay warm now held a family built on sacrifice and grace. Michael, once tormented by loss and power, had found peace in choosing us every day. Life had taught us hard knowledge, knowledge that betrayal could come from closest blood, knowledge that mercy cost dearly, knowledge that love required courage greater than any fight. The lesson was clear. True strength lay not in retribution, but in breaking chains. Examples came not from schools, but from scars, healing them, learning from them, teaching our children a better way. Knowledge shaped us, lessons guided us. Education and compassion became our legacy. To everyone who has followed this journey with us, may you know good health, a joyful life filled with love, and daily peace that no storm can shake. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Alex Truths, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear that love conquers all divides. Tell us in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Does it remind you of real life, of love that defies odds, of forgiveness that heals? We read every comment and cherish the emotions you share from deep within your hearts. Thank you for being part of this family. See you in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.